Hi, this is IkwerreGirl Acheru, all the ways from Talk2Dot. As you know, my channel talks about domestic violence and domestic abuse, and I try to advise people before they go into relationship to look out for certain red flags that they must not ignore so that they don't find themselves in a mess. Because trust me, not getting into is better than getting into and trying to come out of it. I also advise those that are in an abusive relationship to wake up and do something about their situation. And then obviously for those that have come out of an abusive relationship, what to expect, how to find their way back to their healing, find their way back to who they are, and live the best life. So in a nutshell, that's what I do in Talk2Dot. As we come into a brand new beginning of a brand new year, it's quite important to look back at the old year, back at the things that we've gone through, look at where we are today and be thankful. And that's why today, special episode, I'm going to be showing you highlights from some of the videos that we've done this year. Highlights of the videos that will help you answer certain questions you're asking yourself, that will help you answer certain things that you maybe bothering you, mind-boggling questions. And hopefully at the end of seeing some of these highlights, it will help you make a decision, the right decision.
What is domestic violence? So we define domestic violence or domestic abuse, as both words can be used interchangeably. We define domestic abuse as an incident or a pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, degrading, threatening, and violent behavior within the home. So typically involving a spouse or a partner. So people sometimes escape abusive relationships and then still find themselves going back to those relationships. And I think the reason for this is something called trauma bonding. So we'll need a whole episode to talk about that. But in simple terms, is simply when you're so connected to your abuser that even when you leave your abuser, you start to feel like you're incomplete. And even when you start to rebuild your life again, it feels like you're missing something because you're already so used to abuse. So anything that is not abuse feels very alien to you. There's a whole study of trauma bonding out there, which, you know, if this is something that you find yourself in, it's best to study and maybe see a psychologist or a therapist, and they can help you walk through that situation. Is it unsafe to leave? Yes and no. So there are records, there are statistics of people who have left abusive situations or abusive relationships and have got killed shortly after. But the statistics of those who have been killed within the abusive relationship is actually more than those who have been killed after leaving. So I think it's it's a case of it could go either way. There are lots of resources out there, and there are lots of organizations that help people who are going through abusive or trying to leave abusive situations. There are lots of organizations that help them, help to keep them safe. So I would recommend that. The impact of domestic violence on kids. Everything that we identified as impact on the abused adult is the same for the kids. So kids get to experience the fear, they lose their confidence, they also have experienced a loss of identity, they don't know who they are anymore, they go through really dark periods of, they could even end up being depressed, very sad, feeling like it's their fault all the time. I think for all the impacts that we've identified, the biggest one for me is the potential that the kids have of actually growing up to become abusers themselves and therefore propagating the cycle of abuse. Impacts of staying in an abusive situation. There's a lot of impact on all negative. There's a loss of self-esteem. There's a loss of your identity, so you start to lose your identity of who you are as a person, as an individual. There also could be lack of confidence. So even if you were once a really confident person, you find yourself just lacking the confidence to do things that normally you should be able to do. The other impact is usually in abusive situations, your relationships with people suffer. So a lot of people that have gone through abuse have often said that their abusers always try to isolate them from their friends and family, the network. So your relationships with the outside world really reduces. One other impact that I can think of straight away from remaining in an abusive situation is your ability to achieve. So like some people are they're really driven, very ambitious, they're very talented people, but because they've found themselves entangled in an abusive relationship, all of the things that they could have been doing, they can't get to doing. It's a really negative cycle. It keeps you kind of suppressed and oppressed, such that your talent is not able to come out. There's many more impacts of remaining in an abusive relationship. That's just a few. Should you remain in a domestic abusive situation because of the children? No. In fact, you should leave an abusive situation because of the children. So, advice for people before you go into a relationship: just make sure that you have done a fair amount of work on yourself, and you've kind of come into your own, and you know exactly who you are, what you want, what you're about. You need to be able to establish, I think it's really important to establish a fair sense of self before you go into a relationship. Is so important. Can't overemphasize that. A lot of us go into relationships without, first of all, knowing who we are and what we stand for, our values, what we want from life, what we want from our partners, that sort of thing. For those people who are unfortunately and sadly have found themselves in abusive relationships or marriages, the only advice I'll have for you is to leave. That's the only thing I can say. It's not worth it. Just leave. There is a difference between a good relationship and a bad relationship, and this is how I like to classify it. So there is no perfect relationship. We know that because there are no perfect human beings. Having said that, a good relationship is one where both parties can grow, respect each other, listen to each other, and are not afraid to be themselves with each other. So even when the problems come and the challenges come, both parties can work together to help that relationship thrive. That's a good relationship. A bad relationship or an abusive relationship, it won't happen. It would not work. So my advice would be to leave. My advice to people who have left abusive relationships and feel a little bit deflated is to be kind to yourself. It's a normal feeling. It's a normal emotion. There is bound to be that sense of defeat and deflation, but be kind to yourself and give yourself time to heal. You will come out stronger in the end, and you'll be so grateful that you left. Who can experience domestic abuse? Anyone. Anyone can experience domestic abuse. The beautiful, the not so beautiful, the tall, the not so tall, the plump, the not so plump, the educated, the not so educated, the religious, the not very religious. Any kind of person can experience domestic abuse. Why don't people leave domestic violence? There's a number of reasons why people choose to stay. First and foremost, usually top of that list is the children. You know, people say, oh, we want the children to grow up in two-parent homes, so they stay. The other reason is religion. So lots of practicing Christians will say, well, God hates divorce, and so they will stay in that situation. The third reason why people don't leave domestic violence is fear. So there's a fear, first of all, of what people will say. So that's outside. But there's also the fear of what the perpetrator or their abuser could do to them if they left. Okay. Don't forget that this is a relationship that has been built on fear. So fear is the defining factor. So they find it really difficult to leave. Then there's the other reason of denial. So a lot of people who are in those situations live in denial. There's two ways of looking at denial. There's, first of all, is saying they may be aware of the abuse that they're facing, but don't want to accept it. The second level of that denial is they're not even aware. So even when other people see the abuse and point it out to them, they can't see it themselves because they're in it, they're in the middle of that situation. It's really difficult for them to be objective, stand outside that situation, looking inwards and seeing the abuse. So there's the two levels of denial there. So there's several reasons why people do not leave domestic violent situations, and these are just only 4 reasons I've given here. Can an abusive person change? The honest answer to that is I don't know. I really don't know. Studies have shown that it is really difficult for an abuser to change. What they say happens is they change their tactics. I am yet to find a story or someone who has actually come to me and said, oh, my abuser changed, he's changed for the better. I think that I think abusers are kind of born with some intricate sort of characteristics, some ingrained personality traits that then makes it possible for them to become abusers. So because of those traits that are kind of inborn, given the right circumstances and the right environment, they will then thrive in abuse. So it's really difficult for me to answer that question. I think the debate is out on that.
As I always say to people, put yourself first. There's nothing wrong with putting yourself first. Put yourself first. Because what's going on is that you always put everyone first. You put yourself behind. You want everyone else to be happy. You don't think about yourself. I mean, you do think about yourself, but you put people before you. For the first time, put yourself first. For once, put yourself first. Think about yourself. Think about. Because if there's no you, what's going to happen? Everyone's going to get on with whatever they do. Do not stay in an abusive relationship. Never do that. My name is IkwerreGirl Acheru, and I'm coming to you from Talk2Dot. I wish you success. I wish you peace. And I'm sending you lots of love and cuddles and hugs. Stay blessed. If you are in an abusive relationship, if you think you might be in an abusive relationship, do not stay in isolation. Isolation is the breeding ground of abuse. Talk to someone about it. There's so many portals online, so many places you can reach out. Do a search on Google. And seriously, if you have no one to talk to, I'm here. Talk2Dot. Ask me questions, and I'll guide you through the process. From me to you, One love, peace, guidance, and respect.